At 0530 local time, a Russian Bayern M corvette, armed with 8-caliber cruise missiles, was stationed in the Sea of Azov, readying to launch an attack on Ukrainian cities. The operation had been largely silent until that moment, but everything shifted in mere seconds. Unbeknownst to the Russian crew, 7 Ukrainian drones were closing in. The lead drone, a Rebecca, surged to 400 kilometers per hour as Russian checkpoint guns unleashed a barrage. Tracers lit up the early dawn sky, each 23mm shell capable of obliterating a drone into fragments. That's when the situation escalated. The gunner at the checkpoint, unable to spot the drones, relied on their sound, aiming at the distinct whine of their motors. He adjusted his fire, tracking the noise. The lead Rebecca veered sharply left as 23mm shells detonated nearby, any one of them a potential death blow. Pushing to its limit at 432 kilometers per hour, the drone screamed past, outpacing the gun's aim. But the gunfire had already compromised the mission, alerting every Russian outpost within a 10-kilometer radius. Messages raced across Telegram, outpacing military radios, and the advantage of surprise was lost. Suddenly, the drone operator's screen turned to static. Power lines, invisible until the last moment, loomed ahead. The drone climbed sharply, narrowly avoiding 110,000 volts by just 2 meters. Instruments went wild, the compass spun erratically, and the video feed flickered, leaving the drone flying blind for 3 harrowing seconds. A radio tower loomed suddenly out of the darkness. The operator sharply veered left, narrowly avoiding the guy wires by inches. Following the lead Rebecca, 2 additional drones trailed 30 seconds behind, exploiting the turmoil to slip past. These were Spear drones, engineered to disable the ship's radar defenses, and their success was crucial. Meanwhile, 4 Bober drones took a northern path, cruising at a slower 200 kilometers per hour, but loaded with heavier warheads. They were the heavy strike force, poised to hit after the Rebeccas paved the way. However, telegram alerts had already reached the next checkpoint. A Repellent 1 jammer lay in wait, flooding control frequencies with 400 watts of electromagnetic interference. The lead drone's screen went dark, its signal cut off. The Ukrainians, anticipating this, had pre-programmed waypoints. The drone switched to autonomous mode, relying on its accelerometer and optical landmarks to navigate blindly through the electromagnetic chaos. 3 minutes later, the video feed flickered back on. The Bober was still on target. But ahead, a BTR-82 blocked the highway, its machine gun firing in preset patterns. The operator maneuvered into an industrial zone, using buildings to obstruct the line of sight. Yet those buildings concealed Russian soldiers, who swarmed out like a disturbed anthill at the sound of drone engines. The drone maintained a 10-meter altitude. At this low altitude, the Earth's curvature created radar shadows, shielding the drones. A hilltop radar, capable of detecting 50 kilometers at higher altitudes, could only see 12 kilometers when the drones hugged the ground. Physics became their defense against the BTR. The drones navigated unseen safe corridors as soldiers fired at fleeting sounds and glimpses. But probability doesn't bend. Concentrated fire from a coordinated squad finally struck true. The third Rebecca plummeted into a parking lot, its warhead exploding on impact. Only 2 Bobers and 2 Rebeccas remained. Losing more was unthinkable. Then, as the lead Rebecca crested the final ridge, the operator's screen revealed a shocking anomaly. The mission briefing was disastrously wrong. With just 4 seconds to act, the operator faced a choice that could either save the mission or doom every drone. The Panzer system fired 6 missiles simultaneously. Not standard surface-to-air missiles, but Panzer M anti-drone interceptors, developed after commercial quadcopters exposed flaws in Russian air defenses. Each 12-kilogram missile carried 200 tungsten spheres in a fragmentation warhead, designed to form a donut-shaped kill zone tailored for small UAVs. The spheres expanded at 1,800 meters per second, creating a 10-meter-wide lethal cloud, more than sufficient to obliterate the drones. As the Panzer operator fired, he employed layered engagement tactics, launching missiles at staggered altitudes, the first at 50 meters, the second at 100 meters, the third at 150 meters at 30, and the third at 10, ensuring the drone would pass through at least one fragmentation zone. The fire control system calculated intercept points based on the drone's trajectory, forming a 3-dimensional kill box. Each missile's proximity fuse emitted radio pulses, waiting to detect sufficient metal to trigger detonation. But the Rebecca's operator had thoroughly studied Panzer engagements. He knew the missiles had a critical weakness, a 1.2-second arming delay after launch, a safety mechanism to protect the launcher from premature detonation. At 432 kilometers per hour, the drone covered 144 meters in those 1.2 seconds. Spotting the missile launch flares, the operator slammed the stick forward, diving directly toward the Panzer. The missiles streaked overhead, their proximity fuses still safed, unable to detonate even as the drone passed within meters. By the time the fuses armed, the Rebecca was already below, exploiting the launcher's own safety protocols as a shield. The operator leveled the drone at 5 meters, aligning it with the Podlet K-1 radar, the critical system feeding targeting data to every Russian launcher within 200 kilometers. The Panzer's twin 30mm cannons roared to life, each barrel unleashing 5,000 rounds per minute. The gunner employed boxing tactics, firing to create rectangular kill zones where the drone was predicted to be. But the fire control system required 1.5 seconds to calculate, 0.5 seconds for servo motors to adjust aim, and 1.5 seconds for rounds to travel 2 kilometers, a total lag of 3.5 seconds. The drone operator, changing course every 2 seconds, ensured the system was always targeting an obsolete position. The Rebecca surged forward and crashed into the radar antenna. Its shaped charge detonated, triggering the Monroe effect. This phenomenon occurs when a shaped charge's explosion compresses a copper cone into a hypersonic jet, not melting but deforming the metal under extreme pressure, enabling it to pierce armor like a needle through paper at 7,000 meters per second. The jet tore through the antenna array, processing units, operator stations, and exited the back wall, dispersing into a copper spray. The second Rebecca zeroed in on the P-18 spoon rest early warning radar. The Panzer switched to thermal imaging as a backup, but dawn brought a temperature inversion, cool air trapped beneath warmer air, causing thermal shimmer and false heat signatures as the air layers mixed. The drone's electric motors produced minimal heat, only about 10 degrees Celsius above ambient compared to the morning sea, which still held yesterday's warmth. The drone appeared as a fleeting cold spot on thermal imaging, vanishing entirely when passing over cooler land patches. The Panzer's thermal imager, designed to track jet engines at 600 degrees Celsius, struggled to maintain lock on such a small temperature difference. In desperation, the Panzer gunner resorted to a predetermined spiral firing pattern, starting at the drone's last known position and expanding outward. This water hose tactic might work against helicopters unable to change direction quickly, but the drone could pivot 90 degrees in half a second. Despite 5,000 rounds fired, not a single hit landed. The Rebecca struck the P-18 radar dead center, instantly erasing 200 kilometers of radar coverage. With both the Podlet K-1 and P-18 radars destroyed, the corvette, 4 kilometers offshore, lost its early warning network. Without these systems providing initial detection and tracking, the ship's own radar, limited to a 40-kilometer range, left it with less than 2 minutes of warning. The defensive shield safeguarding the corvette had collapsed. The ship, poised to launch missiles at Ukraine, was now blind and exposed. The corvette's radar picked up the incoming drones at 4 kilometers, registering ghost contacts that flickered in and out with each wave. The Russian ship faced a daunting challenge, distinguishing drones flying at 3 meters altitude from 2-meter waves, both producing similar radar returns. The Doppler shift, typically used to differentiate moving targets from stationary objects, became unreliable as the drones varied their speeds between 80 and 120 knots. The computer's clutter rejection algorithm, designed to filter out sea spray, began mistakenly dismissing real threats. Every third sweep, the drones vanished entirely from the radar screen, flagged as false returns by the processor. Yet this didn't deter the crew from attempting to deploy their weapons against the elusive targets. The AK-630 M2 Duet system roared to life with a mechanical whine, its twin 30mm cannons unleashing 10,000 rounds per minute. The fire control computer relied on Kalman filtering algorithms, which predict a target's next position by blending past trajectory data with current sensor inputs, like estimating a zigzagging car's path by averaging observed movements with physically possible ones. But the drone operators disrupted these calculations with random maneuvers every 2 seconds. The Duet system, built to counter 3,000-kilogram P-270 Mosquet missiles with predictable paths, struggled against 150-kilogram drones weaving erratically. It took 3.5 seconds to generate a firing solution, but the drones shifted course every 2 seconds, rendering the math obsolete. Undeterred by their missed shots, the corvette activated its PK-10 decoy system, launching clouds of chaff, aluminum strips cut to half the wavelength of targeting radars. Each strip produced a radar return larger than the drones, flooding screens within 50 kilometers with hundreds of false targets. Against radar-guided missiles, this would have sown chaos. But against drones piloted by human operators using camera feeds, the chaff was merely a dazzling display in the morning sun. The operators, unfazed, maintained visual lock on the ship. The corvette's TK-25E electronic countermeasure suite sprang into action, emitting 200 watts across a spectrum from 20 MHz to 40 GHz. Against standard radio-controlled drones, this would have severed the control link instantly. But the Ukrainian drones employed frequency-hopping spread spectrum, cycling through 128 channels per second in a pseudo-random sequence known only to their operators. The jamming disrupted individual hops, causing occasional frame drops and pixelation, but never blocked enough consecutive channels to break the connection. The video feed dropped from 1080p to 480p, irritating but still functional. Anticipating the next move, the corvette's captain ordered evasive S-turns at maximum speed, but physics was unforgiving. The 949-ton vessel required 15 seconds to shift heading by 30 degrees, while a drone could pivot in 50 milliseconds. The Rebecca's operator identified the ship's maneuvering pattern and timed his approach for the stable moment between turns. At 500 meters, he switched to manual control, the radar mast dominating his screen, 6 meters of critical electronics. The duet cannons couldn't depress below -5 degrees, and at 200 meters range and 3 meters altitude, trigonometry placed the drone below their firing arc. Sailors armed with PKM machine guns fired from the deck but faced an insurmountable challenge. The drone crossed their field of view in 0.8 seconds, while human eyes needed 0.2 seconds to focus, 0.3 seconds to track, and 2 seconds to aim. By then, the drone had moved 100 meters, leaving the sailors firing at afterimages seared into their retinas. The lead bobber targeted the ship's mast, home to its radar arrays, its shaped charge primed to obliterate them. The captain shouted for emergency launch procedures, desperate to fire the Caliber missiles before the ship was incapacitated. But the launch sequence demanded 2 minutes for gyroscope alignment, target validation, and missile warming. The bobbers were 30 seconds out. The first bobber crashed head-on into the mast, instantly disabling every radar, communication suite, and data link on the corvette. Unable to fire its missiles, the ship became a defenseless target. The second bobber dove toward the port side at a 30-degree angle, its operator targeting the junction between frames 44 and 52, where the missile magazine lay behind 15 millimeters of steel plating. A precise hit could detonate the Caliber missiles in their cells, turning the ship into a spectacular explosion. At 100 meters, the operator made a final adjustment, compensating for the ship's 8-knot drift and 3-degree list from its evasive turn. The shaped charge required a perfect 90-degree impact for maximum penetration. The operator had rehearsed this 500 times in simulation, but reality introduced variables no training could replicate. Hands trembling from adrenaline, sea spray clouding the camera lens, and the weight of knowing a miss would prolong the suffering of friends under Caliber missile attacks. The bobber struck the missile magazine's forward bulkhead precisely. Its shaped charge, a copper cone encased in explosives, triggered the Monroe effect, with detonation waves forming a jet of molten metal traveling at 7,000 meters per second. The 15-millimeter steel plate offered no more resistance than tissue paper. The jet pierced through, spraying molten copper across stored ammunition and missile components. The second bobber also hit its mark, striking the missile handling equipment linked to the vertical launch tubes, damaging hydraulic pumps, fuel lines, and electrical systems that transformed missiles into guided weapons. The blast compromised 3 systems at once. Hydraulic fluid at 3,000 psi sprayed across electrical panels, sparking instant arc fires. Missile coolant lines ruptured, releasing toxic hydrazine derivatives. And critically, warhead safety interlocks disengaged, rendering the 8 Caliber missiles armed but inoperable. Despite the devastation, the corvette didn't sink. It limped into port 12 hours later, its superstructure charred, hull breached in multiple spots, and smoke still rising from internal fires. Repairs would take at least 18 months, assuming Russia could source parts through sanctions. The 8 Caliber missiles intended for Ukrainian cities remained unfired. Ukrainian operators, stationed in bunkers 300 kilometers away, had neutralized a $500 million warship using components sourced from Alibaba. Mission accomplished for now.